Commander Vexor stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. The blue marble hung peacefully in the void, unaware that its fate had been sealed 3 cycles ago in the war councils of the HFY Empire. Another primitive world. Another easy conquest. Another species to add to the Empire's vast collection of subjugated civilizations. So, his tactical officer reported, long-range scan confirmed the intelligence reports. Single planetary government, nuclear-level technology, approximately 8 billion inhabitants. No interstellar defense grid. Vexor's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The HFY had conquered 4 to 7 worlds using the same efficient method. Arrive in overwhelming force, demonstrate superior firepower, accept the inevitable surrender, and establish tribute systems. Most species begged for mercy within hours. Some took days. None had ever taken longer than a week. Begin standard conquest protocol. Vexor ordered. Full fleet deployment above their major population centers. Target their military installations but avoid civilian casualties. We need the workforce intact. The bridge hummed with activity as the HFY war fleet, 200 ships strong, moved into position. Vexor had brought enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface twice over, but he expected to use none of it. The humans would see reason, just as every other species had. The first phase began with electromagnetic pulse attacks that crippled Earth's communication networks and power grids. Cities went dark across the globe. Military bases fell silent. Satellites tumbled dead in orbit. Within 6 hours, human civilization had been knocked back to the pre-industrial age. Broadcast a standard surrender demand. Vexor commanded. The message went out on every frequency, translated into the dominant human languages. The words were familiar, honed by decades of successful conquest. People of Earth, you have been selected for integration into the HFY Empire. Your military resistance is futile. Surrender now, and your species will be treated with dignity as valued members of our civilization. Resist and face annihilation. You have 72 hours to respond. Vexor expected the first surrender broadcast within 12 hours. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The humans went silent. Not the silence of fear or despair that usually followed the initial strike. This was different. This was the silence of preparation. So, the sensor officer called out, "We're detecting unusual electromagnetic activity across the planet. It appears to be coordinated." Explain. The humans are somehow maintaining communication using primitive radio networks. They're organizing, sir. Without their advanced technology, they're reverting to older methods. Vexor's eyes narrowed. Impossible. We've crippled their infrastructure completely. Nevertheless, sir, population centers are mobilizing. Military units are regrouping. It's as if they expected this. The first indication that something was wrong came 18 hours later. Human aircraft, primitive jets that should have been grounded by the EMP, began attacking HFY atmospheric patrols. The planes were ancient, jury-rigged, and should have been no match for alien technology. Yet they kept coming. How are they flying? Vexor demanded as another patrol ship's distress signal cut to static. They've hardened their older aircraft against electromagnetic interference, the tactical officer reported. They're using vacuum tubes instead of microprocessors. It's crude, but effective. More troubling reports flooded in. Human ground forces were using weapons that shouldn't exist, firearms that functioned without electronic components, explosives that detonated without digital triggers, communications equipment that ran on principles a century old. It was as if they had prepared for this exact scenario. So, the intelligence officer said, "We're receiving fragments of human communications. They are not discussing surrender. They are discussing tactics." Vexor felt his first moment of unease. In 4 to 7 previous conquests, no species had ever failed to at least attempt negotiation. The pattern was always the same: shock, despair, desperate attempts at communication, and then inevitable surrender. The humans weren't following the pattern. By the end of the first day, HFY casualties numbered in the dozens. Not catastrophic, but unprecedented. No species had ever inflicted meaningful losses during the surrender phase. The humans weren't just resisting. They were adapting. So, The sensor officer reported, "We're detecting large-scale movement in remote areas. The humans appear to be evacuating their major cities." "Evacuation suggests they are preparing for extended conflict," Vextor mused. "Signal the fleet. Begin precision strikes on military targets. Show them our power." The orbital bombardment began at dawn of the second day. Precise energy beams lanced down from the heavens, turning military bases into smoking craters and reducing weapons factories to glowing slag. The demonstration should have broken any remaining resistance. Instead, the attack seemed to galvanize the humans further. "So," the communications officer said, "we're picking up a broadcast from planet surface. It's not a surrender. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm, clear, and utterly without fear. It spoke in the dominant human language, but translation software rendered it into Kefar instantly. "To the alien forces above Earth, you have made a fundamental error in your understanding of our species. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate with invaders. We do not beg for mercy. You have attacked our world, threatened our children, and destroyed our cities. There will be no second chances. There will be no peace talks. There will be no tribute. There will be only war, and war, and war, until either you leave our world or we bury you in it. This is not a threat. This is a promise." Vextor stared at the view screen, watching the planet that refused to behave as every other world had. For the first time in his military career, he felt something he had never experienced during a conquest operation: fear. The war room aboard the Eternal Dominion had been designed for victory celebrations, not crisis management. Vextor stood before a holographic display showing Earth's surface, watching red indicators multiply across every continent. Each marker represented human resistance that should have been impossible. "Status report," he commanded. Major Keldan, his ground operations coordinator, looked exhausted. "Sir, we've lost contact with 60% of our forward reconnaissance teams. The humans are using guerrilla tactics we've never encountered. They attack from underground tunnels, from civilian buildings, from locations our sensors can't penetrate." "How are they coordinating without electronic communications?" "They're using runners, sir. Human messengers on foot, on primitive vehicles, carrying orders across vast distances. It's incredibly inefficient, but it's working because we can't intercept or jam it." Vextor's tactical displays showed the impossible: a planet-wide resistance network operating with Stone Age communication methods, yet achieving military coordination that rivaled advanced civilizations. The humans had abandoned their dependence on technology and reverted to something more fundamental. "What about their leadership?" Vextor asked. "Every species is a command structure. Eliminate the leaders, and the resistance collapses." "Sir, that's the problem. They don't appear to have centralized leadership. Every population center is operating independently. Every military unit is making its own decisions. It's as if the entire species have become a single, decentralized fighting force." The implications were staggering. The Kefar Empire had conquered dozens of worlds by targeting command structures and forcing surrender through leadership elimination. But the humans had no single point of failure. They had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that fought as individuals while functioning as a unified whole. "So," the intelligence officer interrupted, "we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. Several conquered worlds are asking questions about the Earth operation." Vextor felt his stomach drop. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know why the conquest is taking so long. Some are asking if the humans have successfully resisted. So, if word spreads that a species can actually fight back effectively." The unspoken threat hung in the air. The Kefar Empire controlled its territory through the myth of invincibility. If other species learned that resistance was possible, if they saw that humans could fight back and inflict real damage, double the ground forces, Vextor ordered. "If they want to fight, we'll show them what real warfare looks like." The second wave of Kefar troops descended to Earth's surface expecting to face a demoralized, disorganized resistance. Instead, they encountered something that would haunt their military doctrine for generations. The humans had learned it. In the 72 hours since the invasion began, they had analyzed Kefar tactics, identified weaknesses, and developed countermeasures. They had turned their cities into mazes of death, their countryside into killing fields, and their civilization into a weapon. Captain Desron led the assault on what had once been called New York. The city was dark, seemingly abandoned, its towers reaching toward the sky like broken teeth. His company of elite Kethvar warriors moved through the streets with confidence born of 4 decades of easy victories. The first attack came from above. Primitive human projectiles rained down from the towering buildings, but these weren't random shots. They were coordinated, precise, designed to funnel the Kethvar forces into predetermined kill zones. "Contact front!" Desron shouted as his point squad was decimated by what appeared to be an explosion triggered by someone pulling a string. Not electronic detonation, manual triggering that their sensors couldn't detect. The humans emerged from everywhere and nowhere. Manholes in the streets opened to reveal fighters with weapons that shouldn't work but did. Windows that appeared empty became firing positions. The city itself had become a weapon, and the humans were its ammunition. "They are using the infrastructure against us," Desron reported through primitive radio. The humans had forced even the advanced Kethvar to abandon their electronic communication systems. "Every building is a fortress. Every street is a trap. They've had 72 hours to prepare, and they've used every minute." But the most unsettling discovery came when Desron's forces finally cornered a group of human fighters in a subway tunnel. The standard Kethvar protocol was to demand surrender and process prisoners. When he called for their submission, the humans' response was something no Kethvar had ever heard in 4 decades of conquest. They laughed. "You think we're going to surrender?" One of the humans called out in accented but understandable Kethvar. "You've been doing this to other worlds for 40 years. You think we didn't know about that? You think we didn't prepare for this exact scenario?" The revelation hit like a physical blow. The humans had known about the Kethvar Empire. They had studied their methods, their tactics, their psychology. They had prepared for invasion not with hope for mercy, but with the absolute certainty that it would come. "We know about the Zalani," another human voice echoed through the tunnel. "We know about the Porthak, the Methians, the Quelix. We know you've done this to 4 to 7 worlds. We know you expect us to beg." The tunnel erupted in primitive explosions that had been placed with surgical precision. Desron's company was decimated, but the human's final words followed him as he retreated. "We studied every species you conquered. We learned from their mistakes. We prepared for 40 years. And we're going to show you what happens when you attack a species that doesn't believe in second chances." Back on the Eternal Dominion, Vextor received casualty reports that defied comprehension. In 3 days, the humans had inflicted more damage on Kethvar forces than the previous 4 to 7 conquests combined, and they showed no signs of slowing down. "So," the communications officer said, "we're receiving another planet-wide broadcast from the human leadership." "Put it through." The voice was different this time, but the message was eerily consistent. "Day 3 of the invasion. We are not requesting terms. We are not seeking negotiation. We are informing you that every day you remain on our world, we will kill more of your people. We will learn more about your weaknesses. We will become more dangerous. You have invaded Earth under the assumption that we would behave like every other species you have conquered. That assumption will cost you everything." Vextor stared at the blue world that had become his nightmare. For the first time in his career, he considered the possibility that the Kethvar Empire might not achieve victory. The humans had turned their entire world into a weapon, and they were just getting started. The Emergency Council convened in the deepest secure chamber of the Eternal Dominion, where thick armor plating and energy shields protected the Kethvar leadership from the increasingly accurate human projectiles that had begun targeting their flagship. Vextor faced the holographic images of High Command, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright horror. "Explain," High Admiral Krexel demanded, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds, "how a single primitive planet has inflicted 30,000 casualties on our forces in 1 week." Vextor struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a madman. "Sir, the humans are unlike any species we've encountered. They don't fight like a civilization seeking survival. They fight like a species that has already decided the cost of victory is irrelevant." "Clarify." "They've weaponized their entire planet, sir. Every city, every building, every tunnel has been turned into a killing ground. They are using tactics we've never seen, coordinated attacks by groups that have never met, supply lines that function without central control, and command structures that don't exist. Admiral Yesara, veteran of 23 conquests, leaned forward. What about their government? Their military leadership? They don't have traditional leadership anymore, sir. The invasion appears to have triggered something unprecedented. They become a distributed organism with a single purpose, killing us. The council chamber fell silent. In the background, the constant vibration of human projectiles striking the ship's shields provided a rhythmic reminder of the war raging below. So, Major Keldan added, our xenobiologists have made a disturbing discovery. The humans aren't just organized, they're evolving. Not biologically, but tactically. Every engagement teaches them something new about our capabilities, and they adapt faster than we can counter. High Admiral Krexthol's mandibles clicked ominously. Show me. The holographic display shifted to show battlefield recordings from the past week. The first engagement showed humans using primitive but effective tactics. But as the recordings progressed, the evolution became apparent. The humans had learned to predict Kethvar movements, to exploit weaknesses in their armor, to coordinate attacks across vast distances using nothing but timing and desperation. They reverse-engineered our plasma weapons. Keldan continued. Not the technology. They can't replicate that. But they figured out how to disrupt the power flow using their primitive materials. They are building traps that turn our own weapons against us. And the civilians? Asked Admiral Yesara. There are no civilians, sir. Every human above the age of 12 appears to be participating in the resistance. The young ones carry messages and supplies through areas too dangerous for adults. The elderly provide intelligence and coordination. The sick and wounded build weapons and explosives from their hospital beds. The implications were staggering. The Kethvar had conquered world with populations in the billions, but they had never faced a species where every individual was a combatant. The humans had turned the concept of total war into something beyond imagination. What about their cities? Krexthal asked. Orbital bombardment should have broken their morale. Sir, that's the most disturbing part. They are not defending their cities. They are using them as bait. When we target population centers, they evacuate the civilians and turn the empty buildings into elaborate traps for our ground forces. They are sacrificing their own infrastructure to kill our soldiers. The display showed the horrifying reality. City after city systematically abandoned, then transformed into mechanical death traps. The humans had given up their civilization to create the ultimate weapon, their entire planet. So, the intelligence officer interrupted, we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Other conquered species are beginning to ask questions. Some are requesting information about resistance techniques. We're seeing the first stirrings of unrest in sectors that have been pacified for decades. The Council exchanged glances. The unthinkable was happening. The myth of Kethvar invincibility was cracking, and the cracks were spreading across the galaxy. How many ships have we lost? Krexthal asked quietly. 4 to 7, sir. The humans have developed surface-to-orbit weapons using salvaged materials and... Vexthor paused, knowing how insane the next words would sound. And what our scientists describe as weaponized mathematics. They are calculating trajectory and timing so precisely that they are hitting moving targets in orbit using projectiles that should be incapable of reaching us. That's impossible. So, the humans appear to have converted their entire educational system into a military training program. They are teaching children to calculate orbital mechanics and ballistic trajectories. They are using their universities as weapons development centers. They've turned their entire civilization into a single, focused instrument of war. The holographic display showed the latest intelligence reports. Human children as young as 10 were performing calculations that allowed resistance fighters to target orbital platforms with improvised weapons. Scholars and scientists were developing new tactics daily. Artists were creating psychological warfare campaigns that were beginning to affect Kethvar morale. So, communications officer reported, we're receiving another planetary broadcast. Put it through. The voice that filled the chamber was calm, measured, and absolutely without compromise. Week 1 of the invasion is complete. We have analyzed your tactical patterns, studied your psychological responses, and identified your systemic vulnerabilities. We have killed 30,000 of your people. We have destroyed 4 to 7 of your ships. We have learned that you are not invincible. We are now entering Phase 2 of our defense. Every day you remain on our world, we will become more dangerous. Every hour you delay your withdrawal, we will develop new methods of killing your people. You have seen our defensive capabilities. You have not yet seen our offensive ones. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. So, Vexthor said quietly, I believe we have made a fundamental error in our understanding of this species. We assumed they would behave like every other civilization we've conquered. But the humans aren't fighting for survival. They are fighting for annihilation, ours or theirs. They don't want to negotiate. They don't want to surrender. They want to teach the galaxy what happens when you attack a species that doesn't believe in second chances. High Admiral Krexthal stared at the tactical displays showing Earth. For the first time in his career, he was faced with a choice he had never had to make. Begin Phase 2 ground assault, he ordered. Crush them completely. But as the words left his mouth, he realized that the humans had already forced him to make the very mistake they wanted him to make. They had turned his victory into an all-or-nothing gamble, and they had chosen the battlefield. The war was about to begin in earnest. The battle for Earth entered its second week with an engagement that would reshape galactic warfare forever. Vexthor stood in the command center, watching real-time feeds from 100 simultaneous conflicts across the planet's surface. The humans had transformed their world into something unprecedented, a living weapon that grew deadlier with each passing hour. So, the tactical officer reported, the second wave ground assault has encountered complications. Vexthor watched the feeds with growing horror. The humans had used the first week to study HFY tactics, and now they were implementing countermeasures that should have been impossible for a pre-interstellar civilization. They had turned physics into a weapon, mathematics into a killing tool, and human ingenuity into something that defied all military doctrine. Show me the London engagement, he ordered. The holographic display revealed a city that no longer resembled anything from HFY reconnaissance. The humans had restructured the entire urban landscape in 7 days, creating a 3-dimensional maze of death that extended from the deepest subway tunnels to the highest rooftops. But most disturbing was the coordination. They are fighting as a single organism, the xenobiologist reported. Every human in the city appears to be connected to every other human through some form of distributed intelligence we can't comprehend. They are not using radio, not using electronics, but they are achieving real-time coordination across thousands of combatants. On the display, HFY forces advanced through empty streets, only to be met by attacks that came from every direction simultaneously. The humans had weaponized their knowledge of their own city, turning familiar environments into killing fields that claimed lives with surgical precision. How are they achieving this coordination? Vexthor demanded. So, our best analysis suggests they are using something we might call cultural telepathy. They know their environment so intimately, understand their fellow humans so completely, that they can predict and coordinate actions without direct communication. They are fighting as if they share a single mind. The implications were staggering. The HFY Empire had conquered civilizations that possessed advanced telepathic capabilities, but they had never faced a species that could achieve telepathic-level coordination through pure cultural familiarity. So, the intelligence officer interrupted. We're receiving reports from the Beijing operation. The humans they've started taking prisoners. The council chamber fell silent. In 4 to 7 previous conquests, no species had ever successfully captured HFY personnel. Their armor was impenetrable, their weapons superior, their training decades in advance of any primitive species. Put me through to Colonel Vashtan, Vexthor ordered. The communication crackled with interference. So, the humans have developed capture techniques specifically designed for our physiology. They're using our own armor against us, turning our mobility systems into restraints. They're studying us. Explain. They are conducting real-time analysis of our equipment, our tactics, our psychological responses. They are learning faster than we can adapt. So, they're not trying to kill all of us. They are trying to understand us completely. The horrifying truth began to crystallize. The humans weren't just fighting for their planet. They were conducting the most comprehensive military intelligence operation in galactic history. They were learning everything about HFY technology, tactics, and psychology while simultaneously developing countermeasures. So, the communications officer said, "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's not a broadcast. It's a direct communication to you personally." "How is that possible?" "Sir, they're addressing you by name and rank. They know who you are." The voice that filled the command center was calm, educated, and spoke perfect HFY. "Commander Vexthor, we know about your 4 to 7 previous conquests. We know about your military record. We know about your family on the homeworld. We know about your fears, your tactics, your psychological profile. We have studied you for 40 years, and we are prepared for this moment. You have made the mistake of attacking a species that does not give second chances. You have 15 minutes to begin withdrawal procedures, or we will demonstrate capabilities you have not yet seen." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "So," the sensor officer said, "we're detecting massive energy signatures across the planet. It's not possible. They are building something." The tactical display showed the impossible, coordinated construction project across every continent, using salvaged materials and human labor to create structures that defied analysis. The humans had been building while fighting, creating something that would change the nature of the conflict forever. "So," the xenobiologist said, "our analysis suggests the humans have been preparing for this invasion for decades. Every aspect of their civilization, their education, their infrastructure, their cultural development, has been designed to create the ultimate anti-invasion organism." "That's impossible. They couldn't have known we were coming." "So, they didn't know when you were coming. They knew you were coming. They studied the 4 to 7 previous conquests, analyzed the patterns, and built their entire civilization around the assumption that invasion was inevitable." The horrifying truth was revealed in the intelligence reports. The humans had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. They had studied every HFY conquest, learned from every defeated species, and designed their entire civilization as a weapon against invasion. "They turned their whole planet into a trap," Vexthor whispered. "They've been waiting for us." "So," the tactical officer interrupted, "the energy signatures are reaching critical levels. Whatever they are building, it's almost complete." The communications officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission. It's from orbit, from behind us." The main display shifted to show the impossible. Human spacecraft, dozens of them, emerging from the darkness of space. They were crude, improvised, built from salvaged materials and desperation. But they were there, and they were armed. "How?" Vexthor demanded. "So, they've been launching materials into orbit for the past week. Small payloads, using primitive rockets that were dismissed as insignificant. They've been building a fleet in space while we were focused on the ground war." The voice that filled the bridge was transmitted from one of the human spacecraft. "Commander Vexthor, you have failed to withdraw. You have failed to learn. You have failed to understand that humanity does not surrender. We are now activating our final defensive protocol. You have attacked a species that spent 40 years preparing for this moment. You have attacked a species that does not believe in second chances. You have attacked a species that turns every challenge into an opportunity to evolve. You are about to learn why no species in this galaxy has ever made that mistake twice." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that should not have worked, using tactics that should not have been possible, coordinated by a species that had turned their entire civilization into a single, focused instrument of war. For the first time in HFY history, their fleet was taking damage from a species they had come to conquer. The final battle for Earth began not with grand strategies or massive armies, but with a simple mathematical equation broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. The humans had calculated exactly how long it would take for news of their resistance to reach every conquered world in the HFY Empire. The number was 4 to 7 days, 1 day for each world that had fallen before them. Vexthor stood in the ruins of his command center, watching his fleet burn in Earth's orbit. The humans had achieved the impossible. They had turned defensive operation into an offensive victory, using nothing but ingenuity, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. So, his communication officer reported, we're receiving simultaneous transmission from 17 conquered worlds. They're asking for resistance training. The nightmare scenario was unfolding exactly as the humans had planned. They hadn't just offended their world. They had created a galactic revolution. Every species that had been conquered by the HFY Empire was learning that resistance was possible. So, the tactical officer said, human ground forces are advancing on all fronts. They are not pushing us back. They are herding us towards specific locations. Vexthor realized the truth with crystalline clarity. The humans had never been fighting a defensive war. They had been fighting an educational one. Every battle, every engagement, every tactical exchange had been designed to teach the galaxy a single lesson. The HFY Empire could be defeated. Put me through to the human command frequency, he ordered. The voice that responded was calm, professional, and absolutely without malice. Commander Vexthor, you have something to say. I want to negotiate. No. The simple word carried the weight of human history. Vexthor felt 4-7 successful conquest crumble in the face of a species that had redefined the concept of warfare itself. I can offer you terms. No. Your planet will be destroyed if you continue this resistance. No. Please, Vexthor said, and for the first time in his career, he meant it. We can reach an understanding. We can coexist. We can... No. The transmission ended, leaving Vexthor alone with the realization that the humans had already won. Not just a battle for Earth, but the war for the galaxy itself. They had turned their defense into a teaching moment, and the lesson was spreading across the stars. So, the intelligence officer said, we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Resistance movements are forming on 31 worlds. They are using human tactics, human strategies, human philosophy. They are not asking for terms. They are not seeking negotiation. They are demanding complete withdrawal. The displays showed the impossible, an empire that had stood for centuries beginning to crumble as conquered species learned that they didn't need to accept subjugation. The humans had done more than resist. They had created a template for galactic revolution. So, the tactical officer said, human forces are requesting permission to board our ships. For what purpose? They want to provide medical assistance to our wounded and safe passage to our escape pods. Vexthor stared at the display. After 2 weeks of the most brutal warfare in galactic history, the humans were offering mercy to their enemies, not because they had to, but because they chose to. So, the communications officer said, we're receiving a final transmission from the planetary surface. The voice that filled the bridge was different from the others, older, sadder, but still utterly resolute. Commander Vexthor, your fleet is defeated. Your invasion has failed. Your empire is ending. But you and your people will live. You will return to your homeworld. You will tell your government what you learned here. You will explain that humanity does not surrender, does not negotiate with invaders, and does not give second chances. You will tell them that we have shared our knowledge with every species you have conquered, and that the galaxy will never again accept subjugation. You will tell them that the age of empire is over, and the age of freedom has begun. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, the voice carried the weight of an entire species. You came here expecting to find another world to conquer. Instead, you found a species that had been preparing for your arrival for 40 years. You found a species that turned their entire civilization into a weapon against oppression. You found a species that refuses to accept defeat because they understand that some things are worth any cost. You found humanity, and now the galaxy knows what that means. The escape pods began launching from the HFY fleet, carrying survivors back to an empire that would never be the same. As Vexthor entered his own pod, he looked back at the blue world that had changed everything. Earth hung in space, scarred but unbroken, surrounded by the debris of an invasion that had become a revolution. The humans had won not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple refusal to accept defeat. As a pod carried him toward the edge of the solar system, Vexthor received one final transmission from Earth. Tell them we don't need a second chance. Tell them we got it right the first time. The pod's display showed the galaxy spread out before him, and Vexthor realized that everything had changed. The humans had transformed their defense into something unprecedented, a galactic awakening that would reshape the balance of power forever. 4 to 7 world had fallen to the HFY Empire. 4 to 7 species had begged for mercy and received subjugation. But the 48 world had done something different. They had fought back, they had won, and they had taught the galaxy that freedom was possible. As Vextor's pod disappeared into the darkness between stars, Earth began broadcasting its message of resistance across the galaxy. Not as conquerors, but as teachers. Not as an empire, but as a species that had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes, the best way to change a galaxy is to refuse to let the galaxy change you. The age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun, and it had started with a single, simple truth. Humanity doesn't need a second chance because they get it right the first time.